Let me just say about Libya. Everything you say I totally agree with, except for the fact that we abandoned Libya. The light footprint. They needed all kinds of help, which they could pay for. They needed help with securing their borders. They needed help with setting up a police and army force. They needed to help with disarming these militias, which are still roaming around. We watched the deterioration in the eastern part of Libya. We watched it. We saw the threats to our embassy. We saw the al-Qaeda elements coming in. 10 different al-Qaeda-affiliated groups are around Benghazi as we speak. We watched it happen, because we didn't do the things that we knew were necessary to assist them to set up the first government that literally that they've ever had. And we obviously paid a very heavy price for it.
And we watched great Ambassador Stevens being killed in such a savage way, probably linked to what you are saying. Of course, that is true. That is true, but that is not a reason not to intervene. That is a reason to change the move even in Libya. I think that, for example, America and France...
Could I just say, I think that's why the follow-up is always so important. Help the Syrians, but then realize that the international community has a lot to do.
Unfortunately, you are not in office.
Yeah.
I will never be. But if we were, there is, for example, a project which I happened to propose it recently to President Hollande. America could be a partner of that, to build in Benghazi or in Tripoli a real institute of leaders, of building of leaders, according to local views, of course, according to what is a Muslim country, but with democratic value. A sort of national school of leaders in a country where, in Libya, you have 42 years without any state, without any civil society, and not even a nation. So ground zero of policy. We could follow up, of course, for example, with that. We have in France a school called École Nationale d'Administration, Administration National School, something like that. This would be a great partnership between America and France, could be built in Benghazi. And I'm sure that they would take. The Libyan leaders would be more than happy of this sort of help.
And they need a police force and an army.
Well, I just want to follow up on that a little bit and pull back the lens somewhat, because you know, we have the honor of having you here, and it gives us an opportunity to hear from you how the U.S. is viewed these days, both in France and in the and in Europe more broadly. You know, you raised a question. You know, does the United States are we working closely enough with Europe on these kinds of issues? Do you sense a strong alliance? Is there a perception of whether America is on its way up or on its way down? I'm just curious to get your view of how America appears right now.
There is one thing which was noticed in Europe in the acceptance speech of President Obama a few weeks ago, which is that the word Europe was not uttered once in his speech. He did not say Europe. So I don't know, is that a bad sign or not? I leave it to Europe. I hope not. I hope the current administration knows that whatever is a stake on the West, whatever is the emergency of dealing with Chinese things and so on, there is a link of flesh and of blood and of values between America and Europe. I hope this is well understood in America. In Libya, it seemed yes. I hope it will be in the next situations. I don't know.
I understand our emphasis on the Asia-Pacific region, the world's economy, China, all of those things. But when they use the word pivot, then that's a very serious error in my view. And I think it's kind of coincidental the president was in Asia when obviously Gaza and Israel were on the brink of an all-out conflict. I think that I would strongly advise our national security people in the administration to say that we want to balance. We don't want to pivot. We want to balance. We understand that Asia-Pacific region is very important. God knows, look at the Chinese just landed an aircraft on an aircraft carrier. There's no greater signal of a desire to have a nation that can project power than an aircraft carrier. I say that with some parochialism, obviously, but we have to understand that there's got to be a worldwide leadership, and we can't focus all of our attention on one region. And I hope that the recent upheaval in the Middle East has convinced the administration of that.
Okay, well, let me turn it over to our audience for some questions. I think people are walking around with mics. Also, I think I was supposed to say that you can tweet questions, or somebody can tweet. I'm the wrong guy to talk to about any of that stuff. Okay. Yeah, sure.
My name is François Brenne. I'm French, but I'm living in the States, and I'm proud to be part of the two nations. We know, Mr. Lévy, that because you had very close relationship with President Sarkozy, you have played a key role into the action in Libya, and that's a great thing. And we'll have the opportunity tonight to see your movie about that. I don't know how close you are with current President Hollande. My question is to be very direct, because French people are not very well known to being politically correct. If today we cannot intervene in Syria, as we have been intervening with success in Libya, is it mainly because nobody can really pay the price? And I think it relates well to the theme of the day, the price of greatness. And in that case, nobody can pay the price because actually it wouldn't be a cash payment, but put on a credit card, and nobody can afford that in the Western world, either France, either the States.
It's probably one of the reasons, but the price to pay will be much higher if we don't do. It will be a price to pay in terms of terrorism. It will be a price to pay, as Senator McCain said at the beginning, in terms of reinforcement of Iran. It will be a price to pay in terms of reinforcement of Hezbollah and Hamas. The price to pay will be huge if we are not able today to pay the price of helping the fall of Bashar al-Assad. And you know, about Libya, it's very easy today to say that it was easy at this time. It was very difficult too. It was a completely obscure situation. Nobody knew how much it would cost. The cost was much higher than it was expected. It took many more months than it was announced. The victory was not sure. Gaddafi was not alone. The Russians did endorse at the beginning, but they very soon thought that they had been abused, and so on. So it was a very difficult matter, very costly, but I think it was a big cost to afford in order to avoid a huger price in the future. Same for Syria. If we don't do it today, we will have, as the famous word said, the shame plus the cost in the near future.
I think we could have accelerated the downfall of Gaddafi if we had continued to use U.S. air power, but that's, I regret that, but there's nothing that can be done about it. But I do thank the French and our British friends for the enormous effort they made. And I think the administration also deserves credit, is that we have provided a lot of the areas of support, such as refueling, such as additional weapons, such as intelligence capability, many other things that our French and British allies and others did not have. And it was that part of our contribution was really vital.
Okay, over here.
Good morning. My name is Bridget, and I'm actually from Arizona, so nice to see you again, Senator. My question has to do with more of the other parts of the Middle East. I think that, well, maybe not me personally, but do you think the world community is more hesitant to get involved with Syria because of the collapse of other states around it? So if, say, we intervened in Syria, what if there was a revolution in Yemen, which there were a lot of protests, or Oman, or in Iran, there's huge protests about the failing of their currency. Do you think that there's a possibility for the whole Middle East to change in, say, 5, 10 years? Or do you think that this is more a motivation of, you know, Russia is playing a certain side versus the West? You know, any thoughts?
I think as far as the United States is concerned, it's a war weariness is a big factor. People are very weary. Iraq, Afghanistan, a fear of getting into a prolonged conflict, which perhaps the United States might escalate and become more involved than initially anticipated. It wouldn't be the first conflict that escalated in that fashion. So I think war weariness, the economy and jobs, but I also think that there is a rising amount of American public opinion that want us to do something about this slaughter. I really do. It's just antithetical to everything that America stands for and believes in. These stories are horrific. I wish every American could go to a refugee camp as Joe Lieberman and Lindsey Graham and I did and hear the stories. They're just so heartbreaking, and I think I'm fairly tough old guy, but it just breaks your heart. And so I think there is some momentum, but every day that goes by, then the solutions are going to be even more complicated. And I guess it was one of the Syrian leaders that said, after this is over, just as you said, that we're going to remember who helped us and who didn't. And the thing that bothers me more, as much as anything else, is this enormous influx of al-Qaeda and extremists that are pouring into Syria from all over the Middle East. It's going to makes it really difficult to set up. Look at the problems they're having in Libya with just what they've got to contend with. But again, I want to emphasize, the Middle East is changing and the world is changing. I don't think the Arab Spring is confined to the Middle East. I don't see how the Chinese can continue the way that they're on with this little group of people, and all the corruption and all the ways that people have of communicating with each other nowadays, and the ongoing scandals that we see. So I think not only is there going to be changes in the Middle East, I think there's going to be changes throughout the world, where people are going to want to assert and obtain their God-given rights. And I think that Putin's going to have difficulties in Russia. And where it all leads, I'm not exactly sure, but I promise you that 2 years from now, I hope we'll have the same kind of conversation, and we'll be looking at a very, very different world. The question is what leadership role does the United States and our allies and friends play in shaping this new world that's going to emerge in the 21st century?